So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for coming to this little conversation with Simon Barber and Brian O'Connor, aka Sodajerker. Extraordinarily successful podcast, Sodajerker on songwriting, to give its official title. What I'm hoping is we'll find out a little bit about how Simon and Brian first got together and how they got the idea for the podcast, and you know, where they see it going and what their experience has been like and all that kind of stuff. So, gentlemen, thanks ever so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
A long way to be with us, so I really appreciate it. So thanks very much indeed. Just to make good on my promise a moment ago, I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about how you first discovered you had a common interest in songwriting and how that led up to, you know, the formation of your musical partnership, and then subsequently this kind of interest in songwriting in a more public sense.
I think it was our interest in music that brought us together as friends first.
It's cool.
Yeah, we were 12 when we met.
12 when we met, I think about 14 maybe when we became friends.
Yeah, it takes a couple of years at that age.
Yeah.
And we started working on music pretty much straight away, didn't we? I was in a band, and Brian joined and learned how to play bass to be in the band.
Right.
To be in the gang.
Yeah. What was the name of the band?
It was called Blue Rinse.
Okay.
We passed the shot called Blue Rinse on the way here as well.
You did? Oh, it's a sign. In every sense, it was a sign. Yeah.
And then we just were in various bands over the years, and always writing songs together, even at an early age. And then we were in a band that started to do fairly well. You know, we did the usual sort of things that you do. We toured around, we made a record, we got on Radio 1, Radio 2 and all those sorts of things, and then the drummer moved to China. And so
that was the end of that.
Yeah. What was the name of that band, just so people can...
That was called Santa Carla.
Okay.
Which is a reference to the 1987 vampire movie The Lost Boys.
All right, okay.
Pretty much everything we do is in some way related to an obscure movie reference. And so, yeah, so that made rehearsal difficult.
Yeah. So
we ended up sort of just partnering up and writing songs together under this new name, Sodajerker.
Yeah.
And so songwriting was kind of always a thing for us.
Right, okay. So it's been like fundamental to your friendship and your common interest in your friendship right from the very beginning. Okay, all right, that's interesting. And just so we know, which obscure movie is Sodajerker from?
Well, that came from an interview with a film director, Sidney Pollack.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Director of Tootsie and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he was talking about his early career as an actor, and he said it didn't really take off because of his looks. He always got cast as the Sodajerker.
Oh, okay.
It was like, the soda, and it turned out to be like the guy who like ran the soda fountain in like the store on the corner, you know, or in a diner or something. And just like the look of the word and the shape of the word, and suggested it's Psy, and then you found that like academic essay or something.
Yeah, there was an article called The Linguistic Concoctions of the Sodajerker, and it was about how the culture of being a Sodajerker was about making interesting names for the things that you would make.
Oh, okay.
So taking the everyday and making it interesting.
Oh right, so like names for the ice cream,
the dishes on the menu. Yeah.
So a cup of tea would be scandal soup, and eggs on toast would be Adam and Eve on a raft.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. Scrambled eggs would be Adam Eve on a raft and Wreckham.
Yeah. So we thought that's a nice kind of metaphor for songwriting.
Yeah.
Is taking
Indeed it is. Yeah.
And a kind of craft-based job, you know, but
Yeah.
you have to imbue it with something interesting.
And using stuff that's been, you know, used plenty of times before.
Yeah.
You know, and making something new out of it.
Exactly.
You know, the kind of the creativity as well, you know, innovation as well as tradition.
Exactly.
It's got
And
everything.
it was a nice alliteration there as well with songwriting.
Plus the domain name was free and the Twitter handle
Right.
and all of that. So.
These are all considerations.
Yeah.
They truly are. I also think that's quite a good album title. What was it? The Linguistic?
Concoctions of the Sodajerker.
Yeah.
You can find it online, the art's interesting.
Yeah, okay. Go back to source on that one. Alright, so great. So the Sodajerker project, if you like, that was your songwriting outlet.
Yeah,
initially, wasn't it? Yeah.
That lasted, well, it's sort of still ongoing.
Yeah.
But but that was the focus to start with, and then somewhere along the line, we just looking for ways to kind of draw people's attention, really. And I think we brainstormed one afternoon, and you suggested a podcast, and
we were already listening to podcasts at that point, long form content, interviews, and I think we'd always had an interest in interviews in general, to be honest. I mean, we were trading VHS tapes of interesting Tonight Show interviews when we were like 15, you know, so I think we were always keen to find out as much as we could about people, especially creative people. So we thought, well, we've got a good rapport, why don't we try and introduce that to other people and see if they like us more, maybe they'll engage more with our music or whatever else we do.
So I mean that was it was kind of get traffic to the website sort
initially,
of initially. So when you came up with that idea, I mean it's a great idea. But did you have any experience of what it? Because one of the things that media students do here is have a go at making a podcast. The degree that I teach on and that some of the students here study on isn't kind of a vocational skills based thing, but they do. That's one of the things that you can do. Was that something you could already do, or was that something that you just kind of found out as you went along?
I mean, we learned the specifics of doing it as we went, but I've always been a bit of a tech nerd anyway, so...
we've done a lot of kind of home recording, just from being in bands and stuff, a lot of, 4 tracks and stuff.
And I'd been doing stuff online, like making websites and things like that, so...
Right.
We had the sort of a sense that we could record some stuff and get it online.
So you had the feel for it already. Okay, so you've got the aesthetic thing going on, the songwriting thing, but you've also got that kind of knowledge, the more practical, electronic knowledge backing it up. All right, that's good. So you've got this idea. What I'd like to know is how the second interview that you got was Todd Rundgren, because that's quite high to be going in on your second interview.
Sheer luck.
I mean, the answer to that is we just asked.
We drew up a list of songwriters we liked and found contacts for them, publicists, management, whatever. Sent off a load of emails and just waited to see what came back. And Todd was one of the 2 to come back first, basically.
The first one was Billy Steinberg. If you don't know Billy Steinberg, he wrote Like a Virgin for Madonna, Eternal Flame, The Bangles, True Colours of Cyndi Lauper. I Drove All Night from Rooks. So, he was one of the small handful of people that we contacted, and he got back and said, yeah, sure, sounds good. And he had no reason to give us his time at all, really, did he?
We had nothing to offer him by way of like, well, this is what we do, nothing. He just said, yeah, sure. And Todd said the same. We did them sort of back to back, pretty much those interviews as well, and do the first 2 episodes, and then we were off.
Right.
And then we had a bit of leverage then for sort of future guests with Lisa. We had Todd Rundgren on,
Sort of like a calling card, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's fantastic, and also those 2 show, in terms of the art of songwriting, and also something that's characteristic of the podcast, I think anyway, as a whole, is that you've got somebody like Todd Rundgren that if you have an interest in pop music, then you probably own some of his records, at least you know them. But then somebody like Billy Steinberg, you think, well, who unless you scrutinise the labels, that's a name that you're not necessarily going to know. So I think it's really interesting that you've got there's those 2 elements, isn't there? There's almost like the brill building style, of like the professional songwriter who then places the song with the name artist, or you've got the other thing like with the Todd angle. There's plenty of covers, of course, but it's equally.
And then we had a kind of combination of really with Jimmy Webb. He was sort of episode 4 and has kind of done a bit of both. He's been the kind of brill building-esque guy and the singer-songwriter guy as well, and that was really early on when he just said all right.
And then we literally had some brill building writers, and I think it was episode 6 was Man and Wild, wasn't it? So
Mike Stoller quite early on. And it was all just from asking. We just thought, well, what's the harm?
Absolutely.
There used to be quite a lot of diligence involved in doing that, but these days we sort of get a lot of offers for interviews, so we don't have to work as hard as we want.
I mean, I was gonna ask about that in a way, because it must be unusual, certainly for sort of name artists, somebody like Paloma Faith, for example, who's the current, most recent one that's gone on, to be asked about songwriting. I'm guessing. Did you get that sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, just from sort of the research beforehand, I couldn't really find much at all where she just discussed her actual craft.
Yeah.
It was all sort of just asking her opinions on various sort of topics, current affairs, you know, that kind of thing. It wasn't really very music based at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we was kind of breaking new ground with her, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit. And she was very receptive to it as well, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly what makes it distinctive, I think. That, you know, that there's that angle. So you got this kind of breakthrough with these various names. I just wondered, you know, you say now you get offers, but just to sort of spool it back a few years, what were your kind of criteria for saying, well, let's approach this person or let's approach that person? Were there any sort of, is it just that you thought you liked them, or
initially that was what it was. We just had the sort of, it was almost an unspoken thing.
Yeah, I don't think we ever sat down and talked about any kind of criteria.
I think there is.
There must be.
But yeah, it's hard to kind of pinpoint it. But
I guess when you've been friends for that long, it's just, you know, we can finish each other's sentences.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't really talk. A lot of it is probably unsaid in that sense. But I guess it was people that we just liked.
Initially,
thought, wow, imagine getting a chance to talk to them about those songs.
Exactly, yeah, people we admired, and then just as it's kind of gone on, it's kind of sort of stayed that way, but you just discover more people as you go, and then you get people suggest, like a lot of listeners kind of send us suggestions, and we might not hear them, but we'll look into it and go, oh yeah, they will be interesting, or we'll have offers of people, but yeah, at the beginning it was very much just, well, who do we like?
Yeah.
And then we'll work from there, you know.
So it's a function, I suppose, as well of the, you know, kind of the internet age, isn't it? That they're able to reach out to people, or at least to their agents, at least, or have some sort of.
Yeah, and also it's, you know, you want people to tune in, or whatever the equivalent is on the internet. But you know, you want to sort of attract people, so you do, as cynical as it might sound, you need the kind of marquee names now and again to kind of draw people in.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you might, if you get a good name, and then you can, for every good name, you can get someone who's maybe lesser known, but just as kind of valuable as an artist, and you can introduce that person to a new audience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was showing my students like the run of the things, just to give them a sense of it. And what struck me was the musical variety, which I'm going to ask you about in a minute, but also the equivalence. You know, so you've got McCartney, but you know you've also got Jake Bugg. So you know, somebody with, you know, nearly 60 years of material and somebody with less than 10, but they're kind of responsive to, you know, the questions that you got for them. And I want to ask you as well, actually, about the knowledge. You know, like, would you say that when, you know, you approach somebody, is that somebody that you already kind of know the back catalogue, or would you maybe get a yes from someone and then have to bone up a little bit, or?
Bit of both.
Yeah. It's a mix of that, really. Yeah. Some people, you know, luckily when you get Paul McCartney, you know, we know that stuff inside out, so that's.
We could have been given, you know, half an hour's notice for that one, and probably would have done okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, other people, you know, you won't be that familiar, and in certain cases, you know, they might have had like 50, 60-year career. Like someone like Sodajerker.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know the sort of obvious stuff, the Calendar Girls and things like that. But you know, when you sort of actually look at the body of work, it's like, Jesus, you know, this guy's done a lot of stuff. So you've got.
And a lot of it kind of very far below the radar.
Yeah.
In terms of radio, or just being sort of familiar with it.
There's kind of hidden depth to a lot of these people that isn't necessarily that apparent from their kind of like public image, you know. But yeah, so sometimes there's a lot of homework has to be done.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? And that thing about the variety as well. You know, like I was mentioning earlier on about the Stanley Clarke thing, and oh my God, I've forgotten which Sherman brother was it?
It was Richard.
Richard. That's one of my favourite episodes. You know, the Sherman brothers, who were Disney's in-house composers in the 60s. Even if you never heard of them, you know all their songs. So I was delirious listening to that episode because it was so interesting. This bloke talking about, well, Walt would come in and do this, that kind of thing or the other. So, you know, and then you've got all that kind of musical variety that's going on across the range of your guest. I just wondered, do you see that as like, that they're all doing the same thing, but they're just using different instrumentation or arrangement or different sort of musical structures, but when you sort of bore down into it, it's the same craft? Or what do you reckon?
It seems to be, yeah. I mean, a lot of the techniques and tips and things that people talk about are really common across any genre, to be honest. You know, people like a sort of a rock act like Andrew WK will talk about his process of going into the studio and kind of writing as he goes. He doesn't really make demos. And then you skip to one of the young kind of singer-songwriters like Jake Buggen or Jack Savaretti, for example. He said the same thing, that he's trying to avoid the demo so he doesn't have that kind of lack of spontaneity on the record. And it's like, oh, okay, so, you know, it's pretty much the same sort of approaches being carried across no matter what music.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Avoiding the demo.
Yeah, that comes up a lot, we find.
It does, yeah.
And do you think that's because of the way the recording environment has changed, you know, that you could just knock it out and, you know, in an afternoon in your own room?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the barriers to access this kind of technology are so low now, aren't they?
Yeah.
That you can record at such a high level in your bedroom. It seems almost pointless to make something and then make it again and try and capture the same original inspiration.
Yeah.
And that's their argument. Certainly, Andrew WK was, you know, really like, why would I do anything that didn't count towards the actual product?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And how does that fit with the idea of the songwriter's craft then? You know, the Jimmy Webb thing of, maybe I got this wrong, I don't know, but I always think of him honing and do you know what I mean? Or like a carpenter or something.
Yeah.
I think there's still an element to that.
Yeah.
Even when people are like recording as they write, you know, they're swapping out sections, they're changing the order of things. You know, there's always a kind of whittling down of the idea to the essence, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So those, we've got the musical variety, but somehow it all speaks of a similar sort of approach in the end, the kind of the craft. Would you say that the interviews that you do are unusual for the people that you do them with, in terms of that approach?
They are,
yeah. As I said, something like Paloma, very much so. Someone like Tom O'Dell, even who interviewed a couple of years ago, he said the same. He said, never asked, you know, I get asked like, well, you know, what's my favourite food? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he found it very refreshing. You know, other sorts of people known for being like songwriters and craftsmen, you know, or women, you know, they will sort of have done more of that kind of thing. But generally everyone's very, you know, they're always happy to talk about their work.
Yeah.
We do get complimented a lot on that moment where the guest kind of realises that we're interested in the work.
Yeah.
And we're not going to ask them what they're wearing or what parties they went to or anything like that.
Yeah, we've got a nice little clip here actually, which I'm gonna cue up. But it just reminded me that I think one of the very first ones that I listened to, very first podcasts, was our lovely friend Mr. Raymond, aka Gilbert O'Sullivan, and there was a little moment on there, seemed to me anyway, where you could actually hear it.
Yeah.
You might even have said it out loud.
It draws away the veil.
Yeah. So
that whole interview is just him sort of slowly melting into the story. And by the end, I think he actually said to us, you know, usually people just ask me about my hair. So he was really appreciative of the fact that we cared about the songs. You know.
Yeah, and you know, his latest album is kind of, there's kind of rejuvenation gone on, hasn't there, a little bit with Gilbert. I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm just trying to enter the 21st century here and see what we got here. So this is a little clip of Nile Rodgers, which I think illustrates that thing that you were talking about. So we'll have a listen, and then you can sort of expand and illuminate. So this is you talking to Nile Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, I get that impression from it, that it's not about just playing a G or any G. It has to be the right inversion of G, so that kind of in that sequence it makes the melody happen.
That's exactly correct, bro. It's what we call voice leading. Correct. So if you listen to Bowie's China Girl and you hear my guitar part, I go from the tonic, I go ding, ding, to major 17, ding, 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 6, 5, ding, 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 get it, dum. You the loudest thunder. But it was just being able to sit down with David and just play by myself with him, and he's like, oh, man, this is happening.
Okay, so how does that example demonstrate this thing that you're talking about, would you say?
I think when you can sort of touch on something, maybe on a technical level or maybe just on a craft level with someone, and they realise that you really understand what it is they've been doing, it just really opens them up, you know. And that moment there where he said, "That's exactly correct, bro." We were in this little booth in Abbey Road, in a little sort of recording booth, like a vocal booth, wasn't it? Just really small. We were sitting just right across him from on a table, and when he said that, he leaned over and like grabbed me. You know, I was like, "That's correct, bro." You can't even hear that on the audio, obviously, but it was just a great moment when you actually connect with someone like that in that way. You know, they're going to give you anything you ask for at that point. You know, you can really get inside those. Really get inside those stories.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fantastic, and also it was quite, you know, to a non musicologist, there's some quite techie stuff in there, isn't there? When he's talking about this chord and that chord and that, but somehow that didn't seem to matter because you could also feel the enthusiasm and the way he felt about the track, which was as important as the technical detail, wasn't it? Yeah. In a sense. Do you find that in the interviews, do you get a lot of the, well, I go from the diminished to the or are they more sort of elusive?
A little bit. It depends on the writer. Some writers are very kind of technically schooled, kind of classically trained even, so can talk very fluently in that kind of language, you know. Others are just very instinctive, and you know, I mean, we're not the most technical musicians ourselves, you know what I mean? So we know a bit, but you know, we try and straddle that line of, you know, a bit of technical stuff, but making it accessible to the person who just like to, you know, create.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because when I was first mentioning about or recommending to the students, they were saying, "Oh, I don't read music," or you know, I don't. It would be too technical for me, so it would probably sort of put a barrier between me and you know, the person. I was like, no, it's not like that really. And even if there is in there, it kind of draws you in, and it gives you a bit more information.
Yeah.
Well, how does it? How does that change from major to minor? How does that? Why is that so effective? So I think that's something which does come through, certainly through there.
I mean, some songwriters literally don't know the names of the chords they play. They literally just fumble around until they hit upon something they like, and then they just kind of string something together. Yeah.
Well, famously, or is it infamously, I don't know, that Paul McCartney doesn't read music. Is that still true?
I think he might by now do it, because he's done the sort of orchestral stuff as well, hasn't he? So I think he probably knows a bit more than he cracks on. But certainly, like in the beginning, none of the Beatles were sort of trained musicians at all. I think he's probably picked stuff up. He always had he was always maybe the most sophisticated musician of all of them in terms of some of the chords he used. And, but yeah, I think by now he's probably a little bit more well versed in technical stuff.
Right. Okay. Because interestingly, we've got Paul on the computer here. So
heard earlier.
A little thing that he says, it just kind of reminded me of what he was saying there. Where I think this is where he sort of talks about tricks, how you sort of think yourself into writing in a certain way, which is kind of interesting. So let's see if I can get this one going. Now I think maybe we should describe how it was that you came to interview Paul McCartney before we listen to it. What's the story there? Because there's a great story there.
Well, in a nutshell.
I just asked for 7 years.
Yeah, a lot of persistence. Firstly, yeah. And it was.
I'm just relentless though. I'm like the Jason Voorhees of podcasting. I just keep coming back until eventually.
Yeah, we almost got him a couple of years ago. Actually, his publicist is a fan of the podcast, and he got in touch over 2 years ago now. Paul had the Greatest Hits album coming out, and then one reason or another didn't happen. So he just sat tight for another couple of years, and then in this sort of early July, his publicist got in touch, said, "Do you want to do something with you guys for the new album, Egypt Station?" And we were like, "Great." And then there was another few weeks of waiting, and then we ended up doing it at the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, which is Paul's, how do you describe? Well, it's his old school, which is now the Performing Arts School in Liverpool. And he was there that day to do a sort of Facebook Q&A with Jarvis Cocker, and they did the little unplugged performance, and we interviewed him after that in his dressing room. Yeah. A couple of days before that, we was when we interviewed Nile Rodgers, and that was at Abbey Road. And literally, the moment we wrapped the Nile interview, we went to see a McCartney gig in Abbey Road Studio 2. He was playing like a secret gig, and we got wristbands and literally like ushered down a corridor to see a McCartney gig. Yeah. So it was quite the week.
It was the greatest day of my life.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So the interview, the Jarvis Cocker thing, which I think is you can probably still see online somewhere, can't you? That was in front of an invited audience,
yes.
wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But your interview wasn't, was it?
Yeah.
No. That was originally we were going to do the interview that Jarvis did. Which we were kind of glad that it didn't work out that way, to be honest, because when you get someone like McCartney in front of an audience, he's going to play to that audience, and he's going to tell the familiar tales.
The B7 story.
Yeah, how he went across town to learn B7. He's going to tell those familiar anecdotes, and so we thought, well, that's not conducive to the kinds of questions that we like to ask. You know, I want to ask him some slightly more obscure things about his process, which might not appeal to a big audience in that sense.
Yeah.
So luckily, as it happened, we got him in his dressing room for half an hour after that event. Yeah. So he was in good spirits.
He was.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was great.
And it's just a silly little techie thing, but I suppose it's an important thing. It's just occurred to me. When you, as opposed to over the phone, which we'll talk about in a minute as well, but say, you know, you've got your subject here and you're on the other side of the table or wherever it is, what do you use to record it to make sure you capture it properly?
I just bring a recorder, the standalone Zoom H6 if anyone's interested in the exact model.
Very trusty, isn't it?
Yeah, and a handful of SM58 mics, basically. And I choose that mic particularly because it's a dynamic mic and it doesn't like hear a lot of stuff other than what's exactly in front of it. Right. Which is important given the variance in the places that we end up recording in.
You have a little backup machine as
sometimes it's in hotel rooms, sometimes it's backstage at a gig in the middle of sound check, which has happened to us.
Yes.
But the McCartney one was in a sort of a very reflective room in Lipper. So I just set up the Zoom and the mics in record time sometimes, depending on what the pressure of the situation is like.
You have little mic stands as well, which is makes a massive difference as well in terms because some people are really fidgety when they hold mics. We've discovered.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
And then I'll have to spend 6 hours de-rustling.
I think it's got to the point now actually where I will watch interviews. I'll try and find previous interviews these people have done where they hold the microphones, and I'll watch. Fidgety. Can we give them the mic or no stands? Yeah. It's got to that point now.
Now
that's how forensic.
That is research. I'm going to take a note of that. That is research. That's fantastic.
Yeah, anything we can do to make the final listening experience like comfortable and enjoyable. You know?
Yeah. As Brian said, we also have a backup recorder going as well because obviously if that went down, you can't repeat those things. So.
No. Well, I mean that's the thing, isn't it? I mean they're kind of one-shot things, aren't they?
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
I suppose any interview is, especially, you know,
definitely if you
like
sat in
that.
front of McCartney, yeah, you're not getting
Yeah.
the second bite of
And
the cherry there.
it's not, yeah, and it's not like we do any kind of pre-interview stuff. I mean, a lot of people will prepare the guest or tell them what they're going to ask, or you know, they'll kind of navigate through the interview saying, okay, now we're going to touch on this bit, and then they take all that out later. We don't do any of that. We just walk in, hit record, go.
Okay.
And the thing that you hear is the thing that we did.
Yeah.
Although it's edited, obviously.
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you about editing and whatnot, but let's listen to Paul, and then we'll think about that. So, do you want to introduce it? What it is that he's talking about on this clip? Can you remember the bit?
Yeah, we just we'd heard him say sort of previously that at one time he used to sort of pretend to be different songwriters when he was sitting down to write, just to get in a different kind of headspace and sort of come up with something. He'd sit down and, you know, say, right, I'm George Harrison now, or you know, just to kind of try and come up with something different to what he would usually come up with, and he just sort of expands on that in the clip.
Okay, great. So let's see what he's got to say on that.
Did you say in the past that sometimes you'll think about other writers when you write, like you'll think, oh right, I'm Ray Charles or something like that? Is there any of that on this record?
Right at the end of the album there's a track called Hunt You Down, which is like a little rocky, riffy thing. And that was written right after I'd seen Prince, written in the New Year, and he played a New Year's Eve concert. So I was definitely thinking of him. And the thing is, you know, you think of him, you get inspired, you write it like you're him, and then you listen back to it, it's nothing like him. You know, but it's okay, because you use the inspiration to write. I mean, Long and Winding Road, I had Ray Charles in mind. Certainly didn't turn out like Ray. But those chords, Long and Winding Road, boom, 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 I can imagine that being Ray.
Yeah.
There's just little tricks like that you get, that once they work a couple of times, you go, if you're stuck, you pull them off the shelf, you go, okay, let's try that trick. Let me pretend I'm Bob Dylan, you know, for this bit. We pretend I'm Elvis or whatever, you know. And it often breaks the deadlock, just leads you into a good place.
That's fantastic, yeah. It's just like 1 minute 10 that was, but just all the insight that there is in there. What do you think about that? What do you think about somebody like him imagining himself in the shoes of another songwriter? That's interesting, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think whatever works, really.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you've been around as long as Paul has, you know, I think he's just anything you can do to just sort of get the juices flowing, you know.
Yeah. Because
he's not the only writer who's mentioned that, as well as other writers who've talked about sort of, oh, I'm this person or I'm that person.
Oh,
it's quite a common thing.
Yeah. So then they said, well, what would they do? You know, with this precise one, what change would they make, or whatever it happens to be.
Or they might apply some other kind of limitations on the process. They might say, oh, I can only use these chords, or I can only use these words, or whatever, and that helps them to sort of formulate something. Because obviously the choices these days, it's just limitless, isn't it? You could do almost anything, and you could spend half a day just auditioning snare drum sounds, couldn't you, in the studio. So having some kind of boundary sometimes helps make you more creative in a sort of counterintuitive way.
Yeah. And also, I mean, he's an unusual example of the phenomenon, I suppose, but like absolutely sort of natural songwriter, rather than kind of what we were talking about earlier on, where it's, you know, you get the sense of something being hewn from the oak sort of thing. You get the feel that somehow when he's got that vision, it comes more or less, it's not fully formed. A bit like what you were saying, Carl, about like the earliest demo, was it back in the USSR? Yeah. And like it was maybe the first time it was ever recorded, but it already was like whistling all day. But it's the idea of hearing it. Is that something that a lot of people have said to you?
I think some songwriters have talked about getting songs in dreams, and of course McCartney famously wrote Yesterday in a Dream. But I think Dan Wilson said that he'd written
Secret Smile, I think,
he wrote
Semisonic,
He wrote that in a dream. Nick Lowe said he wrote a song in a dream. So I think if if you give yourself over to the process,
the songs will visit.
Things will start happening. And, and there was an interesting thing Beth Nielsen Chapman said. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's a sort of a Nashville songwriter. She had a lot of pop hits, but she's sort of based in Nashville. And she said that songwriting for her is like being in a gym. She calls it the gym of creativity. And she'll sit there for however many hours she's set aside and quite diligently work, even if nothing's coming. And then she finds that, like, the following day when she's at the grocery store, something happens, but she thinks it's only because
she's put that
time in.
Yeah.
So,
like the muscle memory sort of thing.
Hence the gym metaphor.
Yeah. Oh no, that's really interesting. Yeah. And you know, Van Morrison, who as a listener, I'm suggesting you try and get him.
I'm a bit scared of him.
Yeah.
I think he shows up and spits us out.
I haven't heard good things.
But you know, that's something that he talks about. He says that it's actually really, really hard to write, to keep coming up with material, but at the same time there's a compulsion to do it.
Yeah. I mean,
perhaps against your own best interests.
I mean, you know, who said? I think Justin Curry from Del Mitri said, you know, you can. It's not, in a way, it's not hard to come up with a song. Like he says, I've got loads of songs that are the songs. You know, he said you've got arms and legs and a head. You know.
Yeah.
But whether the good songs is another matter. You know, it's not the hardest thing in the world to come up with a verse and chorus and stick a few words on.
Yeah.
But a good, memorable, meaningful song. That's you know. That's difficult, you know what I mean? Not many people can do that.
I wonder what it is. What is it? What is the distinction between, you know, a song that is in that first category, that you've forgotten it before it's finished, and then a song that is precisely those things, memorable and somehow has an impact on the world, you know, beyond sales or something. I wonder what it is.
Therein lies the mystery.
That is a big question, and I'm looking at you. What are you guys? Yeah, it's because I mean it's it's kind of a rhetorical question, but it's also the question that you're in pursuit of, isn't it? Actually,
we may never find the answer.
But
and we're okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the joy of it, is the mystery of it. What is it that makes us respond to a certain song a certain way? You know, it's an ineffable quality.
And of course, you can try and pin it down with the sorts of mathematical things that you hear from the sort of great Swedish producers and songwriters, or you could just take it as a kind of the mysterious element of this thing that some of them try and define it as being like this external thing that exists that they just channel. That's quite a common thing that songwriters do when they talk about their process.
Or they just drawing it down.
Yeah, like it's some kind of celestial radio that's always playing, and they're just kind of dictating the tracks that they are able to get,
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, some songs, it's it could be the lyrics that get it, could be the melody. People respond to sort of different things. And some songwriters don't place the same emphasis on lyrics as they do melody. Like Fran Healy from Travis told us he sees the lyrics as secondary, but it's melody first for him every time. And I think he said the lyrics sit on top like an invisible cloak.
Right.
I think he said, and he shouldn't. He almost suggested the lyrics shouldn't draw too much attention to themselves; it'll spoil the song.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Whereas Paloma Faith said she's only
all about the words.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, well, we've got Paloma here as well.
Right.
Should we have a little listen to her?
Nice link.
And then we can have a little think about that, because there's something that she mentions which I'd like to ask you about. Here we go. So this was, how recently is this? It's fairly recent.
You'll know the exact date.
It was about a month ago.
Was it?
For about 5 weeks, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good with dates.
Okay. Has she got a new album? Is it kind of
like a reissue of the last album with like
some extra tracks.
expanded with extra tracks on it.
Okay, all right. So what's she talking about here? Just so we're braced.
She's talking about a specific songwriter called Ed Harcourt that she works with, who she feels does something for her as a collaborator which the others don't.
Okay. Yes, she is.
And you wrote that one with Ed Harcourt?
Yeah.
He's one of my long-term collaborators.
Right. How does that collaboration tend to work?
Well, with Ed, it's very much a meeting of souls and minds, and it's not kind of like sitting in a room with loads of people trying to come up with an idea. It's quite intimate with us, and we've got similar taste in music. A lot of songwriters that we like the same, like Tom Waits and Leonard Cohen and Rufus Wainwright, and he very much is inspired by those types of writers. I feel like when I work with him, there's an intimacy. It's like I feel disarmed around him. My truest soul comes out, and he really encourages me to be poetic and all those things that a lot of writers that I have to work with in the commercial realm, they're just into like cookie things. But I feel like the songs that I would want played at my funeral in remembrance of me are pretty much all the ones I wrote with Ed Harcourt.
Right. That's a lovely thing to say, isn't it?
They're the true version of me.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? That's an incredible thing to hear a songwriter say about their own work, and you know, the impact of working with somebody else. And you see, don't you, even if you, I don't know, I've paid a great deal of attention to Paloma Faith particularly, but when I listen to her now, I'm going to listen differently. Because if I know that's how she thinks about it, and that's what goes into it, then, you know, it's a different thing. So it's kind of, these things are transformative as well as just sort of, sometimes maybe just promotional or revealing. They're really revealing, aren't they?
Well, I hadn't, what you said there, you know, sometimes when you're researching, you know, you'll come across the same sort of answer again and again, and you might get one of those answers in your, but that, I hadn't seen her say that anywhere.
Yeah.
That was completely sort of new to us, and it's kind of what you look for, really.
Yeah, well, my little theory, which I've just worked out actually, so I don't know what its shelf life is that she didn't know she thought that until you asked her. And that, I think, you know, that's the art of the interview. Actually.
Yeah, it seemed spontaneous.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? There was just a line of questioning, and suddenly, like, she got a little bit of momentum. Did she talking about what it meant to her?
I just don't think it would. It just wouldn't be occurring to a lot of other interviews to ask about Ed Harcourt. You know, it just wouldn't. You know.
She talks about collaborators there, doesn't she? I might be wrong here, so I'm sorry if I am. Most of the interviews that you've done and that you do are with like single figures, aren't they?
Mostly.
Have you done Ashford and Simpson?
We did Valerie Simpson. Nick Ashford had died.
Right.
But Valerie Simpson. But we did Ben Folds 5, and we did Blossoms. So we've done a couple. Yeah, the Coral. So pairs and trios.
Some partnerships like Man and Wild.
Yeah. What's the difference, would you say? You know, in terms of the dynamic between the two people and how the songs emerge out of that, like what Paloma was talking about there.
I think a lot of those people do tend to divide up the roles, so you tend to have one who's a musical person and one who focuses on the words.
Barry Mann, Man and Wild, Barry Mann is more the music guy, Cynthia's the lyrics,
remind us of the songs that they've written.
We've Lost That Love and Feeling.
Gotta Get Out of This Place.
On Broadway. Oh God.
That's not bad.
That
was it for a first three. That's not bad. So we're dealing with a successful combination there. And in terms of you interviewing them, how did that kind of work out? You know, if they're both there.
I think as a married couple, they're quite used to talking over each other.
Yeah,
I think so.
they bounce off. You know, there's no awkward pauses, put it that way. They bounce off each other very well, and it was just a lot. It was fun. No, they were great. Yeah,
and some people like that have got nothing to prove, actually, have they? You know, in terms of, you know, the status of the songwriting. So they can just relax into it straight away, can't they?
And they're still very enthusiastic about it, even after all these years. They still absolutely love it, love talking about it. They're not jaded in the slightest. Yeah.
Now here's a weird one, which is just for Squeeze fanatics. You did Chris Difford and you did Glenn Tilbrook, and you did them separately. Was that because at that point they were not working together, or did you decide to do them separately, or was it just worked out that way?
Well, Glenn was working on solo stuff. They hadn't. I don't think you were on hiatus from Squeeze at
Yeah.
the time. Just how it worked
It
out,
was
I
just
think.
a logistical thing, I think, more
Right.
than
Glenn was on
people,
tour at the
people
time,
have
wasn't
pointed that out to us since and said, oh, glad you chose to do those two separately.
Yeah.
So you could ask them the same questions
Yeah,
and get
yeah.
those insights.
Yeah.
And we said, yeah.
And they're so different, aren't they?
Yeah, they are very different,
In-
yeah. And they have a very interesting process.
Yeah.
And that's another very clear division of
It
flavour
is.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lyrics and music.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And one until actually, although I've been guzzling Squeeze records since I was about 14, I didn't really understand the division of labour until those interviews.
Mm.
You know, because
Yeah.
you just see it, the credit on the label, don't you? You say, well, you know, they kind of work separately, but they're gonna work
Yeah,
together.
he'd only done that once on the song Hourglass, I think they worked together on.
Right.
And I think Chris described it as two men masturbating in the same room.
With his usual candour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just said it was so awkward and he just never wants to do it again.
Right, isn't
Yeah.
that amazing? And yet they are, you know, you know, you see Bacharach, David, Lennon, McCartney, Anderson, Ulvaeus, Difford and Tilborough aren't far behind, are they, in terms
No,
of the team?
God, not at all. No.
Yeah, there's this amazing, as you say,
Yeah.
sort of.
I mean, it was literally, I think it was a case of like, when they think they lived in the same sort of building in different flats, and Chris would write a lyric and literally slide it under Glenn's door.
Yeah.
At one point, that's how they
Yeah.
were working together.
Yeah.
And it would seem counterintuitive to a lot of people to actually finish the words and the meter of the words and
Yeah.
all of that in
And
advance
yeah.
and then set it to music.
And Glenn wouldn't change a syllable, would he, either, of Chris's lyrics. It's, you know, to make
Really?
it fit better or anything.
Wow, that's
Take
amazing,
it as,
isn't it?
as it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, what a gesture, what a magnanimous gesture to
Mm.
not say, well, these lines are rubbish. These got to go because it cuts right across everything else that we've already
Yeah.
done. You know, I mean, so that's real friendship as well.
Yeah,
as-
it's two
as-
people being very respectful of each other's. You know, like one guy does this better, the other guy does
Yeah.
this better, and let's not tread on each other's territory.
Yeah.
Works, you know.
Yeah.
There is Elton John and Bernie Taupin.
It's a, yeah, it's
Yeah.
a similar
Yeah.
setup.
That seems
yeah.
equally strange to me as well.
Yes, yes, it just sort of mails them over to him.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
From his ranch.
Yeah, to his ranch. Yeah. So I've got my little crib sheet here. I don't want to miss anything out because I'm just aware of the time getting on a little bit. You've mentioned actually about the editing thing. Often you might have half an hour ones for all sorts of reasons. You know, you might have only been given half an hour. And sometimes, like with Paddy McAloon, which we were talking about earlier on, which is, I think, one of my very favourites, along with Richard Sherman, just because I don't believe I've ever heard him talk at such length and with such enthusiasm, with such pleasure about what it means to be a songwriter and a musician, the difficulties of it, and the delights of it. And that's about an hour and 20 or something, isn't it? That's quite long, or an hour and a quarter, or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you tend to just sort of go with what the mood is with the interview, or do you think, oh, we've got to get an hour, or do you have a sense of how long they need to be? I guess that's what
We
I'm asking.
tend to not want them to be any longer than an hour. I think you lose people's attention after
Yeah.
that, really.
Mhm.
There's some podcasts I subscribe to where they drop 4-hour episodes, and I almost never listen to
Yeah.
them.
If you can't listen in one sitting, there's a problem.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Generally speaking, anyway.
But we usually would shoot for about 45 minutes of recording
yeah,
with someone, and that ends up being somewhere close to an hour in the final episode.
yeah.
If they're enjoying talking, you know, I mean, we'll always sort of say, you know, as we're nearing the end of our time, do you mind if just, and they'll, oh, no, it's fine,
Yeah.
generally.
Oftentimes it's the people around the person who say, you've got 30 minutes,
Mm.
you absolutely cannot go over 30 minutes, and we say, okay, fine, and then if we hit 30 minutes and we say, you know, should we finish up, and they say, oh no, this is great, carry on.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's a few that sort of go beyond the hour mark, but only a sort of handful. And, you know, we like to think they merit the length, you know.
Certainly, yeah.
But you can also, you know, you can get a lot, you know, even if you have sort of, you have 30 minutes, yeah, that's like a 20-minute interview. You can still get a lot of information in the 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's surprising.
Yeah.
You know, so some of our like 30-minute ones, there's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
And you know, you don't really need to go beyond. It's just each guest and each episode sort of dictates its own, you know, duration really.
Yeah, sure.
You know.
And because that's a way, I mean, we've been saying that in some ways, you know, whether it's a jazz player or whether it's somebody who wrote for Disney or whether it's in Pomona Faith, there's this commonality. but they're different people too, aren't they?
Mm.
So you know, some are just naturally more loquacious than others. So you know, and I guess you're attentive to that, aren't you? Because you can kind of feel it.
Oh yeah.
You know, while you're actually doing the interview. Do you have wish lists? Are there people that you're thinking one day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We managed to tick a few off this year.
Well,
Yeah.
but, you know, McCartney was the top.
Yeah.
Nile Rodgers was someone we wanted for probably 6 years.
Yeah, but a lot of those, you know, those sort of that top table of songwriters, I suppose you call it, you know, the Carole Kings, Barry Gibb,
Springsteen,
Randy Newman, a lot of those kind of people.
Billy Joel probably as well.
Yeah.
So some, you know, kind of obvious ones, I suppose, if you're talking about the all-time greats. But there's sort of, it's kind of exciting to see, you know, there's people we haven't heard of yet that we've probably interviewed in 6 months' time. And
There's probably people doing the GCSEs now who will be interviewing.
Well, you know, we had Declan McKenna on last year, who was, I think he was like 17 or 18 when we interviewed him.
Yeah.
But with a very mature head on his shoulders. But you know.
And what was that like? What did he have to say? You know, that a 70-year-old, was that different from what a 70-year-old might say?
It wasn't a million miles away.
Not really. He's quite a socially, politically conscious kind of person anyway, isn't he? So.
Yeah, and just very into the whole craft, you know what I mean, and really keen to talk about it. So I think it's good sometimes to get the younger guests because I don't know, they're fresh to songwriting. Yeah. Compared to, you know, someone who's been at it for half a century.
Yeah, sure.
So they just have maybe just a more uncynical and more positive outlook on it than maybe an older guest might have.
So there's some more intuitive and less to do with encounters with the industry, say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay. All right. That's brilliant. I'm just looking at the time here. So how about we open it up and see if we've got any questions?
Sure.
From our lovely guests. So, any questions from anybody? Yes, please.
How do you overcome your nerves when you're interviewing somebody like Paul McCartney and you've got 5 minutes spare? I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, in that instance, I mean, we've been doing it 7 years, so we've learned to control them. But I don't know, on that particular day, we were there all day at Lipper. We got there like midday and we didn't do the interview till 5. So when we got there, I think we were most nervous when we arrived, but then over the course of the day, I always say the nerves move from down here to kind of up here and your heart starts kind of pounding, but that's kind of the adrenaline going and that's a good feeling.
So I thought, as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, this will be fine. Yeah. He seems perfectly nice, it's fine. And then he said, you want a sandwich? And we were like, oh, okay, yeah.
So that's it, that's true. I mean, a lot of the guests, they just put you at your ease immediately. You know, and again, because it's just generally us in the room, there's no reason to put on any airs and grace or anything like that. It's just 3 people talking. So, yeah, I mean, we're nervous pretty much. I'm nervous anyway before every one we do. More just because I just want it to go well. Not necessarily because it's a famous face, although that's a little bit, you know. But you just want it to go well. You don't want any technical hitches. You don't want any, you know, background noise. It's all those. It's more like technical concerns that make you nervous than the actually meeting the person.
Although Brian often turns to me about a minute before every interview and says, I don't know how to do this.
It's become the catchphrase. Yeah. It's kind of true because we both just did sort of fall into doing it. We weren't like seasoned journalists or interviewers before. We just kind of started doing this thing, and now we've got a few under our belt. We feel quite experienced at it, but still there's that little moment. The imposter syndrome, I suppose, kicks in, you know, just for a second.
Okay. It's interesting, you know, this idea of the art of the interview and like striking the right tone, but without for it to be natural. That's the thing, and it's my view that that's what people respond to because that's kind of what happens in your interview.
Yeah, I'd say probably our lack of training as like journalists or interviewers is probably it puts us at an advantage in a way.
Yeah. Because
we just can only be ourselves. We can only talk to these people as just try and have a conversation with them. Yeah. You know, we don't go in there with any sort of agenda or angle or trying to be provocative or confrontational or anything. It's just
And I think if there's any kind of naturalness, it probably comes counterintuitively from being over-prepared. So we do a lot of research and a lot of prep, and then if the guest goes into some other area or it's some sort of tangent, then we're not flummoxed by that really, because we probably know a little bit of something about everything they're going to say. So we can then, you know, we've got a plan, and if they let us take them on that particular journey, that's fine. But if they want to jump around and do other things, then we're not going to be fazed by that particularly, because we've prepped.
Because I mean, that was the Gilbert O'Sullivan thing, wasn't it? There was a moment where he mentioned a fairly sort of obscure track. You said, "Oh, is that where it does this change from da 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 da?" And you can just hear him go, "Oh, okay, all right then. Let's reboot, and I'll think about this differently." Although it was brilliant. So another question. Yes, sir.
Some people would say that podcasting is a bit of a saturated market now because there's so many available, and people making new ones are just shouting into a void and no one's listening. So with that in mind, are you pleased that you've been doing it for 7 years and you might have got in before the trend?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when we started, we did a search for songwriting podcasts and we couldn't find any. There wasn't one, and so
certainly not that like we're interview based.
Yeah, there might have been one where someone was talking about their own process or something like that, but there was no guest list of songwriters that we could find. So yeah, we just got in there early. We were lucky. 2011.
Yeah.
It just so happened that was the moment.
I think if we were starting now, we might have been put off a little bit. I don't know, to sort of discourage anybody here. I think it's not a but it's there's a lot more songwriting based podcasts now that
are they imitated? Have you ever listened to one and think they're ripping us off?
There's one American one which is very similar to us, isn't it? I won't mention its name. But no, there's these other ones just like Song Explode, but that's quite a different format to what we do. That's an artist takes you through a song from its sort of, it's like a voice memo to the finished record and tell you all the decisions they made along the way, and so that's quite different to what we do. And the Writer is, which is a sort of American one. That's more set mostly in the pop world, isn't it? Interviews a lot of the kind of pop songwriting teams. But yeah, I think we were lucky. We got in there first. Yeah.
All right. Great. Yeah.
Hi. I was just wondering, it's kind of a multi-part question, but what the right situation would be if you wanted to do this in book form, using what you've already done, and if you did do it in book form, would you go down the kind of Paul Zollo, Daniel Rachel route, or would you look at those themes that you talked about, those techniques, actually structuring it around those themes and put it together that way?
We're definitely more interested in the themes. So I think the Zollo sort of approach, as good as those books are, it's been done now, and there's a handful of those books that are good and already exist. So if we were to do one based on the interviews, I think we would sort of extrapolate on the themes that come out across the different interviews, and we talk about approaches to melody and approaches to lyric writing and all that sort of stuff.
Oral narrative kind of thing.
Yeah. So I mean, we can do that based on the interviews we've recorded, and we've got them all transcribed and stuff, so we can put that together.
That'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I find with those books that I'm often interested in one area, not interested in that writer, I'm interested in a technique, and then I'm jumping around the book and trying to.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with those books. Really, is there's no overarching insight. Is that it's just kind of discrete pockets of things that people do. It'd be great if you could say, okay, how do all these people approach melody? You could get that,
Exactly, yeah.
So that's the direction we would go.
So can you do that, please?
Okay.
Yeah. You've got one pre-order.
Yeah. I think you just talked yourself into a job there. Yeah. Excellent. Another one. Another question? Yes, sir.
What were some of the mistakes that you guys made in the beginning when you started podcasting? If you can point them out on that, what advice would you give?
Trying to record intros in one pass.
Yeah. Yeah, that was weird, wasn't it? Why did we do that?
I have no idea when we could edit.
Yeah.
We used to think of it more as a performance, and we try and nail a great take.
Oh, you mean the bit where you introduce, contextualise who's coming on?
If we made one mistake right back to the beginning,
we'd spend hours trying to nail this great performance of the intro, and then we just thought, well, now they're just littered with mistakes, and I just take them up.
I don't know really. I mean, because the format hasn't kind of changed a lot since we started, as we've kept pretty much the same sort of framework. Maybe we just really go from the beginning. No, I think we were just, it was more, we were just conscious of I don't know, maybe we just preempted, I suppose, certain like pitfalls, didn't we, in terms of like editing the things, and it's hard to say.
I'm a fastidious planner, so I probably planned away most of the
Yeah,
problems.
we did a few months of sort of like dummy runs and testing out kind of equipment and stuff like that. So yeah, we did a lot. We didn't just sort of jump in at the deep end. We just we did sort of prep a lot, and that kind of set us in good stead. And yeah,
I think we've made some changes in terms of the workflow over the years. Like, there's a pretty distinct way that we make a show now, which we probably didn't have at first, which has evolved over time. More out of necessity than anything else, because we do quite a lot of them now. It'll start with a booking, for example, and then I'm like Janine in Ghostbusters. I sort of hit the bell and say we got one, and then that goes to Brian. Brian makes a playlist, then we start listening, then we do some research, then we do the actual interview, and then after that it goes to me to edit. Then I send the edit to Brian to sign off, and then what do we do after that? I do a mix of the actual final show, and then we write up the sort of text that's going to promo the episode. And so we do the same thing every time, basically.
But that took a while to get that sort of little production line in place. Yeah,
would have been much more random at first. And there's some technical things that have changed over the years as well, probably, in terms of audio and post-processing and stuff like that. Making sure there's not background noise, and various tools have emerged over the years as well. You know, I can mouth declick and lower breaths and take out lip smacks and things like that, which I wasn't doing in the beginning. So now it'll sound completely unnatural.
Do you ever offer copy approval? Like, do you say, well, do you want to hear it before we put it out? Is this all right? Or
no one's really. We don't offer. I don't think anyone's ever.
I think
asked.
maybe once or twice someone has said, "Can we hear it?" I think we've sent it to the publicist, and they've said, "Oh, great," but no one's ever said, "Can we have approval on it before it goes out?"
I mean, we'd be fine with it if they wanted. Like, no one's really.
Plus, we it's kind of innocuous. We're asking about the art and craft of songwriting, so
there's not a lot of salacious content.
No, no. But it's just interesting that everybody, when you look at the list of people that you've spoken to, that everybody's so relaxed about, so content.
Yeah.
You know, that they've.
I think we did sign a non-disclosure agreement with Alicia Keys.
Did we?
Yeah, because she had an EP coming out and we got advance access to it.
Oh, right.
It wasn't available, so we had to sign a little.
Oh, well, that's a very virtuous one, isn't it?
We've had a couple of people ask the questions in advance, but that wasn't to be difficult. It was more to just so they could be prepared and know the kind of things.
So they knew what was coming.
Yeah, they just wanted to sort of do the homework.
But you're talking literally maybe twice out of 125 interviews.
So it's amazing. Yeah, amazing, really. Yeah, fantastic. Yes, sir.
Has it got easier to get guests then? So now you've got like Paul McCartney, and you're like, well, we can get Dylan next, or is it still like?
No,
is it still the chasing?
I think McCartney's the skeleton key, isn't he? He just opened a lot of doors.
Yes. I mean, we had David Crosby. The next episode is David Crosby of Crosby, Stills and Nash, and I think that was pretty much as a result of Paul, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because we tried him quite a lot in the past, and then we tried again and said, oh, by the way, we just had Paul McCartney. And then instant reply from his assistant.
Is that how you say? You say, oh, we've had Paul on recently. Do you fancy getting involved as well?
Yeah, well, we sort of we'll just throw a few names in. Say, oh, recent guests include, and that obviously make sure to include that one. So, yeah, and it was like an instant reply. It was booked within like half an hour or something, Whereas we tried for years before that.
And that happens a lot. Actually, we find it sometimes we get a no from the sort of gatekeepers around the person. And then we'll try again 6 months later and we get a no, and then we might do a direct message with the artist themselves on Twitter and they just write back, would love to.
Yeah. Chris Difford.
So they were never asked, basically.
Yeah. Chris Difford we booked via Twitter. Carol Bear Sager we got via Twitter. Quite a few. It could be a lot easier, but as the site says, it's sometimes you have to sort of jump through hoops.
And you were saying that now people approach you. I mean, clearly that's to do with the reputation. But do you feel as though sometimes you're part of a promotional sort of whirly gig sort of absorbed into
so.
that.
Yeah, I think we're part of that machine now, aren't we, really?
Because we sort of get all the circulars from all the publicists, you know, oh, such as releasing this, you know.
And
so
it's an unfortunate part of it that because it's only a two-man team, we do everything. We actually have to say no to a lot of people. You know, even people that you would recognise. And that we'd actually probably quite like to talk to, but you know, there's 12 episodes in the queue, and we just can't keep saying yes to people. So we unfortunately have to brush people aside.
But that's interesting. Yeah, that shows the degree of sort of value that's associated with, you know, being interviewed in the way that you interview people. You know, rather than the, you know, like say the salacious thing or the what's the favourite colour sort of thing. That there's some value in that. Yes, sir.
I know a lot of big podcasts, you start and end with adverts now, and I know that you haven't done that. So with that in mind, how do you make it a profitable business? if you do, I don't know.
We don't. It's the simple answer.
I think I was never really that keen on the advert model in general for podcasts. We don't really want to be saying, how did you write that beautiful melody and buy a mattress? You know, it's just, it never really worked for me, that. So we chose to go with a kind of donation model, and that sort of works fine, but it doesn't really cover the expense of doing what we do, really, because we're whizzing back and forth to London all the time now doing interviews.
It was a lot cheaper when we were just doing it sort of over Skype and phone, but now it's, a lot of train fares involved now. I mean, you know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be Bill Hicks. If someone came to us and offered like stupid money per episode, you know what I mean? Well, you'd weigh it up as long as there was, but as long as we could make it as unobtrusive into the episode as possible. Because I just find it a very jarring thing. As Si says, you know, you're immersed in a really good interview or whatever it is, and then literally sometimes I've found mid-sentence an ad, like a pre-recorded ad, will just suddenly, you know, just interrupt someone mid-sentence. Like, it's like the editors haven't even considered, let's put this in a, you know, what's the word? Appropriate juncture. They've just stuck it in there, just kind of willy-nilly, which I just find utterly bizarre. So we certainly wouldn't do that.
But there's a lot of value that's come to us from the podcasts, which is, well, both monetary in terms of doing other things, like being asked to make a documentary for the BBC, which we did, for example, which we got paid for. So things like that come to us, but also it's given us this incredible network, you know, and a network has value in that industry. So we know all the managers now and all the publicists, and we've got personal relationships with some of the artists as well. We've kept in touch with several of them, and so for future ventures or for our own songs or for other things we want to do, it's really great to just be able to call on those people, you know. So I'd say it's probably the greatest value we've got out of spending 7 years doing this is we've just built this great network. You know, my Skype contact list is very impressive.
Yeah, and it's obviously, you know, it's its own reward. You know, we've gotten to meet people we never would have dreamed of, really.
Oh yeah, I mean,
so
we do it for nothing, and
we do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Just going to that led into a question that I was going to ask. Just
okay.
Is this a hobby then, and then you have a job around, and how much time do you devote to it? And
I suppose it is essentially a hobby, isn't it? But it's sort of become more than that, because it's a hobby that a lot of people gives a lot of enjoyment to a lot of people. So you know, I don't know if there's maybe a new word has to be invented.
Perhaps even invented an entire medium.
Yeah, but
we can devote quite a lot of time to it, don't we? You know?
Yeah, as much as possible, really. Yeah, like, you know, we both work and stuff, and have kids, and so yeah, it's just whatever spare time we can devote to it.
So that's why I'm trying to optimise those processes, so it can all be happening while we sleep.
Yeah. So
when first starting out, what was it that drew you towards a podcast as opposed to any other format?
Probably just being fans of podcasts.
And the accessibility of it, you know, that's the beauty of it, really. It's just anyone can do it.
And having the Apple Store and being able to get that podcast out to people on such a massive scale, and have it be free as well, there's really no barriers, is there? So, yeah, it's probably just the ideal medium, and that will speak
Let's
directly.
have a go.
Yeah.
Yes, Carl.
As a listener and someone listening to the podcast externally, you said earlier that you don't feel like things have changed too much over the years. But one thing I definitely noticed is you move more from telephone and Skype to being in the room with people.
Yeah.
First, so this is kind of a two-part question. What difference has that made, do you think, to the way that you, what you get out of people? And the second part would be, if you could go back to anybody from the earlier years, or people from the earlier years, and get them in a room rather than over Skype or over a telephone, would that be?
Good question. I think it makes a massive difference being face to face with someone.
Night and day, really.
Yeah, and just not only can you quickly build a rapport with someone, but just all the gestures and things. You know, it's so much easier. Like if someone is talking and I've got another question I want to ask, I can just lean in.
It's
and in that moment, Brian's not going to jump in because he knows I've got a question. The guest sees me lean forward and thinks I'll wrap this answer up because there's another one coming, and all that stuff which on the phone, you know, when you're just a disembodied voice on the phone, none of that stuff happens.
Rogers, would you?
Exactly. You know, you just develop such a better rapport.
And there's particular techniques we use when we're on the phone or on Skype that we don't use in person, because we don't want to jump in and interrupt too much, because as soon as you do that, they stop and then the audio overlaps and they say, oh, sorry, what was that? And then or maybe you ask them to elaborate on something and they give you a kind of a rehash of something they just told you, and ultimately you're wasting precious time. And
you can have delays on the line.
Yeah, so there's loads of stuff like that. We try not to even laugh too much, you know, just because if you get a Skype delay, it's just gonna, you know, throw everybody off. So yeah, it's being in person. There's nothing quite like it.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much wherever possible now we'll do them, you know, in person. We have done for the last sort of 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
As for guests we'd like to, past guests we'd like to interview in person, Jimmy Webb, maybe.
Yeah.
Because you know, I mean, he was great over the phone, but I haven't seen what he's like in. I haven't watched him live and seen what he's like in person and in other interviews. That I think that would have been a good one to have done live. And maybe we don't rule out sort of repeat guests.
Yeah, we were talking today about a possible interview with Paddy McAloo, which would be a repeat but would be in person.
Right.
So we'd go into new areas with him and obviously get to experience that in person vibe.
I mean, any number of artists really who we've spoken to. If you could get face to face, you know, we'd much preferred it. But
we certainly wouldn't have been able to build up the archive that we've got had we insisted, certainly at the beginning.
Yeah.
That you know we have to go to London and sit down with you for this.
Yeah, we had to get a certain way down the road before that became a possibility. Yeah.
But it's happening much more now, isn't it? It's that seems to be the norm now.
Yeah, it's just the way people think of the show now, and all the offers that we get are come to London and do this one type stuff.
It just gets, I don't know, it gets listeners more excited, I think, when they can see a picture of us with the guest, and you know, when we announce it, just gets people that much more excited about it, and I think it's just a better listening experience as well.
So follow on from that, now that you actually have people in the room with you, have you thought about graduating to video?
We did do video with the Ben Folds one early on and decided against it for future episodes.
It adds another layer of pressure maybe, and I think it would be harder to get past like their people, you know what I mean? I think, you know, just going to a room and just having their voice recorded is one thing, being seen on camera. You know, some of them might require an army of, you know, makeup people. Yeah, I would, to be honest.
I mean, we've seen people do makeup for audio, so.
Yeah, Paloma was, she got a makeup done before we had our photo. Yeah, it's fair enough, you know. But so I don't know, I think it might just add.
It does add a level of complexity, doesn't it? You've got to be there early, you've got to set up, things have to go right, there's additional storage requirements for video. You have to have someone manning the cameras while you're on camera doing the interview, so it's more people. Some of these interviews we literally walk in, recorder, hit record, mic's up, go.
It's like a heist.
Yeah, it really is. So I don't think video just wouldn't.
Yeah, it just adds an extra layer of
Plus, I mean, ultimately, this works best for us in podcast form as an audio podcast that people can listen to in the car or in the gym, or you don't want to add that visual requirement to it that makes them think I have to sit down and watch this.
Again, if there was, if it came up, like the one we did was at the sort of suggestion of Ben Folds. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm doing a gallery exhibition with photographs, and you can come there and do it and film it if you like." So, I mean, he said if you like, and I suppose we just took them like, "Oh, we have to film it now." We probably didn't. So we took the guy along with us, and it was, I personally haven't been able to watch it since, but just because I just don't like watching myself. So that would be a problem if we were to do them frequently. I'd have to actually look at myself on camera, which
I'd love that.
Narcissist.
I was just thinking about your own songwriting and how much this process has fed your own creativity, or has it just sucked all your time so you never write anymore?
It's kind of a bit of both. We know so much more now, and we reflect a lot more on these great ideas and tips and tricks and things, but at the same time we have no time to implement any of them. So yeah, it has sucked away a lot of the time that we would have spent writing, but because it just kind of exploded and has kept on this roll, it seems silly of us to kind of take time away from the podcast now, because it's being downloaded millions of times, and it seems like, well, if people like it,
yeah, it kind of insists on itself.
Yeah. So.
But we're always stockpiling ideas and stuff, and we're always sort of planning to do something, but it's just finding the time. But whenever we do sit down, you do find yourself drawing on a lot of what people, you think, oh, that's a Gilbert O'Sullivan move there or something. You find unconsciously almost you start employing other people's techniques and things. Definitely.
We've basically been on the greatest songwriting masterclass for the last 7 years. So.
Yes, it's bound to rub off at some level.
Yeah.
Stuff that impresses you and interests you, reveals some.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you get a breakdown of what countries people are listening to you in, and has any of the places surprised you?
Yeah. Predominantly it's listened to in the UK and America, but there's people all over the world listening, and we get really nice emails, don't we, from people all over the place. Like people who are jogging along the East River in New York, and people who are in Lebanon listening, and it really depends. All over the world, yeah. So it's amazing, really. Some of the emails we get are fantastic, and people who say, I just introduced my daughter to the podcast, and we started writing songs together, and these sorts of things. It's like, wow.
Very gratifying, yeah.
It's lovely.
Because sometimes it's just, I don't know, it's like an exercise in delayed gratification doing a podcast. Because often we'll record an interview like months and months in advance, so we've got but you just can't. For various reasons, you have to reshuffle episodes and things, so it might be months before this particular thing gets out into the open, and even then, you don't necessarily get people this instant feedback. It kind of more sort of trickles through. People are downloading it because you get the sort of download figures, but eventually you get emails trickling through or the odd comments here and there. Which is nice, because it's just nice to sort of be. It just sort of G's you up a little bit,
You ever had a guest that maybe wasn't so easygoing, a bit more difficult to work with?
Generally not. Pretty much everyone is nice, aren't they? I mean, as I've said this earlier, but people who I find who are in the arts, who have devoted their life to writing music, tend to be pretty affable, don't they? I mean, they tend to be pretty friendly and well-meaning.
Yeah.
Obviously, these people are often on a promotional cycle as well, so they're on their best behaviour regardless. But yeah, most people are fine.
Yeah, I think some people just generally like to sort of elucidate more than others. Some people just don't talk as well as other guests, but that's not like a fault necessarily. Some people are just far more in tune with the process than others and can sort of verbalise it, whereas other people might just be a little bit more, I don't really know how I do it, and they'll be a little bit more short and clipped in their answers, but not in this sort of unpleasant way or anything like that.
Some people go to great lengths to put you at ease, like McCartney offers you a sandwich or whatever, but other people wouldn't bother with that, and you might have to break down their kind of force fields in other ways, mainly by demonstrating that you've done the research and that you know the stuff, and that kind of unlocks them a little bit.
Yeah. There's sometimes a little bit of awkwardness. Again, this is the difference between Skype and phone. Establishing a rapport on the phone and on Skype, it's just that little bit harder. Whereas when you're in the room and you shake hands and there's a little bit of small talk, and that just sort of eases. eases the way a little bit, whereas on the phone, there's always that little awkward jump, isn't there? Saying, oh, well, thanks for doing this, yeah. We'll just move into some questions then. It's, you know, whereas that doesn't tend to happen in the in-person ones, does it? It just seems to run much more smoothly. But that's just, again, that's not a fault of the guest. It's just that, or you're talking to a stranger on the phone, you know. So.
Do you find your guests now are fans of the show as well? Because that must be a good inroad as well.
Yeah, it happens quite a lot.
Few of them listen. Yeah, yeah.
I remember Johnny Marr saying
he'd listened to a few before we spoke to him. Yeah, he checked us out. Yeah. Dan Wilson, I know he's a listener. It's a Norwegian songwriter called Sodajerker, who's really good. He's a frequent listener. Chris Difford.
Yeah.
Probably others who don't let on that they listen, but you know.
There's some people in forthcoming episodes who've come in and said, "Oh, I was listening to this episode," or you know, I've heard the last 3 that you did, or whatever. It was just always nice to hear. So yeah, they'll be able to.
Okay. I know. I'm just going to sneak this in at the end. That we have a Miles Kane fan in the audience. So I just wondered what he was like.
He was
really nice.
To talk to interview.
Yeah, he was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the short ones, really. I think we had about half an hour, didn't we, with him?
I mean, he's from Liverpool, isn't he? So.
Yeah, so he had that instant sort of, you know.
Scousers.
Well, he's from the Wirral, so you know, technically.
Yeah, flashy Scouser.
Yeah. But yeah, no, he was very easygoing, cheerful fella.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah.
And he'd worked with Andy Partridge. I was just reminded of Andy Partridge when you said about people who can just go and go and go and go.
Yeah.
And he will always do that.
He said nice things about Andy Partridge and Paul Weller, who he'd co-written.
Yeah.
It's always a weird experience because we never know what it's going to be like when we turn up at these things. And I think we turned up at a venue. We was playing a gig that night
in Liverpool. Yeah.
And outside there's a whole bunch of fans, and they're all queuing, and we just sort of waltz past them, walk straight in.
Without our credentials.
Yeah. It's great. It's a nice feeling sometimes. And then he just came in and we did the chat for about half an hour, and he had to get straight off and sound check or something. Yeah, but he was great.
Yeah.
Very pleasant.
Very insightful about his own.
Yeah, he seems to be someone who reflects quite a lot on the process.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you, Brian and Simon.
Thanks for having us.